Disability in a Global Perspective. Group 5. Ashley, Dolly, Tyler, and Thomas. What is disability? Disability is the consequence of an impairment that may be physical, cognitive, mental, sensory, emotional, developmental, or some combination of these.
A disability may present at birth or occur during a person's lifetime. Why is studying disabilities important?
Critical Disability Studies, or CDS, has grown to influence various fields of studies in social sciences, humanities, applied sciences, and medicine. Many associate disability solely with impairment, but as research efforts are made, there is more of an understanding and emphasis of CDS. All over the world, people place stigmas on the disabled population and inaccurately have represented what disabilities are. The treatment of the disabled, even today, is oppressive, and slowly, with work, it will improve. There is no greater disability in a society than the inability to see a person as more. Robert M. Hensel.
The growth of critical disability studies in America from the early 1600s to present day. Around 1614, the colonies began to enact poor laws, or ugly laws. Ugly laws prohibited people that were unsightly to be seen in public. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the focus of colonial America was on one simple goal: survival. Persons with disabilities were seen as being unable to contribute to this goal, and therefore were viewed as being dependent on others for care. The dependency that was created resulted in persons with disabilities being seen as unhealthy and defective. Early treatment of persons with disabilities was not all bad, however. In 1752, the first general hospital was established in Philadelphia, with having care for persons with mental disabilities a major motive in founding the hospital. In 1793, Kentucky was the first American state to establish provisions for people with intellectual disabilities and mental illnesses. In 1830, almost every state had an almshouse. The purpose of these almshouses were to shelter those unwanted or unable to contribute to the community. However, the almshouses often had horrid living conditions where abuse was common. In 1858, the American Printing House for the Blind was chartered in Louisville, Kentucky. This became the premier printer for materials for people with blindness. During the 19th century, residential schools for the blind and deaf grew significantly. In 1917, Red Cross established the Institute for Crippled and Disabled Men. In 1972, the Society for Disability Studies, SDS, in the U.S. was founded. The Society for Disability Studies is an international nonprofit organization that promotes the study of disability in social, cultural, and political contexts. In 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed by Congress. This act was the nation's first comprehensive civil rights law addressing the needs of people with disabilities. The act prohibited discrimination in employment, public services, public accommodations, and telecommunications. Today, there are hospitals and homes for people with critical disabilities that cannot function on their own, whether they have physical or mental disabilities. These homes care for and socialize persons who would not be able to independently in society.
The quality of life of disabled people in Africa is pathetic because disability has not been mainstreamed, said Joshua Malinga. Disabled people are not represented in parliaments, in organs of decision-making, even on issues that concern them. Governments do not plan with the disabled mind. Society views disabled people as useless liabilities that have no role in society, says Gladys Charoa, a single mother who was left wheelchair-bound by a car accident in 2001. The Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare, Paulina Mpara, says, "We have a big responsibility as a government. At the moment, we have serious financial problems that limit us from adequately addressing the needs of disabled people, but we are aware of their situation." Those with disabilities in Africa seem to confront an uncaring society. The general feeling is that the only places for a disabled person are in the street or in front of a church, begging. And the situation is only worse in rural areas. Children with disabilities are usually confined to the house because of long-held traditional beliefs that they are curses from God. To make things worse, access to counseling, testing, and treatment is very limited. The Zimbabwe government is among many in Africa that have not ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. There has been some legislation enacted to protect the rights of people with disability, but this legislation is mainly put on paper and not enforced. 650 million people are estimated to be living with disabilities globally, and of this number, more than 500 million are in developing countries. The UN's Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is intended to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms for all persons with disabilities. This protocol includes equality before the law, life, liberty, and security of the person, freedom from torture, exploitation, violence, and abuse, freedom of movement and nationality, respect for privacy, access to education and healthcare, work and an adequate standard of living, and participation in culture, political, and public life.
The 3rd of December marks International Day for Persons with Disabilities. 2.8 million South Africans are disabled. 42 million South Africans have difficulty walking or climbing stairs. 450,000 disabled South Africans are under 5 years old. 41 million South Africans have difficulty taking care of themselves. Main causes for disability is injury, violence, illness.
Hold my hand and walk with me. We must break the back of social inequity. We must empower every individual with a disability to live with dignity in an inclusive society. William E. Lightbourne.
According to the United Nations, approximately 1 billion people live with disability. 40 to 80 million of these people live in India. The disabled population continuously struggles in the country of India. The high rate of poverty is an influential factor and a primary reason for the lack of aid. In addition to this, cultural stigmas are believed in India's society. Disability is seen due to past karma. The mother of a 9-year-old girl who was born with a condition, the incomplete development of the spinal cord and its coverings, says that something bad must have happened in her former life to make her disabled. When asked whether the disability may purely be the result of a physical disorder, she held steadfast to her belief that karma was the cause. Despite cultural and economic challenges, some individuals manage to find ways to thrive in their communities. Devender Pal Singh lost his leg during the Kargil War between India and Pakistan in 1999, when a bomb exploded just meters away from him, piercing his body with a shrapnel. Refusing to be overcome by the physical or mental challenges of losing a limb, he became a marathon runner, eventually being dubbed India's Blade Runner, owing to the blade-style prosthetic he uses. Singh formed a support group for people like him called the Challenging Ones. He says he prefers to feel like he has a challenge to overcome than a disability. India, like all countries, need to continue working with the disabled community to provide the lifestyle they deserve. The fight for disability rights is a fight for civil rights. An individual's disability isn't what defines their life. Once that belief is universal, the world will begin to show its much-needed progress.